What's a dead giveaway someone has low intelligence? Story 1. Often wrong, but never in doubt. My ex-mother-in-law once debated with me for half an hour that dry measuring cups, like the scoops, and wet measuring cups, glass vessels with measurements, held different volumes. I had to go scoop out a cup of flour and dump it into the Pyrex for her to understand that one cup is one cup, no matter the vessel. ETA, the debate wasn't whether or not using dry cups or wet cups matters. I actually think it does, and use the appropriate measurement vessel when I bake. The debate was that 1-to-1, they are different. And they aren't. The volume of one cup is one cup, no matter the vessel. I'd argue that it's sort of a social intelligence though. People trust confident people. It just depends on if that person is willing to accept when it's proven they are wrong. The world typically rewards these people the most, actually. These are your business owners and corporate ladder climbers. They fail quite often and are wrong quite often, but they learn from these experiences and are confident enough to push forward regardless of failing or being wrong previously. That's a lot of opinion for so little knowledge. Story 2. No critical thought. I knew a lady who got suspicious of the donkey charity adverts on TV because if they're helping new donkeys, why are they still showing the old ones? I had a skin therapist once who was very sweet, but I don't think thinking was her forte. She was trying to convince me to buy her salon's brand of sunscreen. When I told her I was enjoying the brand I currently use, she asked what SPF it was. I told her 50. She shakes her head and says, "Honey, that isn't actually a lot. When they say 50 SPF, that means 50 SPF in the whole bottle." She just thought there were 50 lonely little SPFs just floating around the bottle. I remember once I was at a men's group meeting, and there was something wrong with a TV remote. I picked it up, started investigating, looked something up, and fixed it. Another guy goes, "Wow, nice. You're a repairman?" And I said, "No, never fixed a TV remote in my life before." And he just was stunned and stammers out, "But how did you fix it?" And I said, "Well, I just thought about it critically." He looked at me like he had no idea what I was talking about. Isn't that thinking about it logically, though? Story 3. They don't just not take the time to listen to other opinions, they actively shoot them down. A lot of debates you see online are going to be people trying to yell over one another. Most of the time, people pick apart grammatical errors or things they didn't actually phrase correctly and use them as the base of their whole argument. An intellectual debate shouldn't include yelling. Hear another person out before disagreeing with them. Then they don't acknowledge any of your points, call you an idiot, and then scream they won because you don't engage them anymore since it's a waste of time. People that don't discuss, but are only there to argue and get the masses on their side, mostly in fandoms more than in real life. It gets tiresome when other people's opinions are aliens made the pyramids, or black people are inferior, don't deserve the time. Try engaging in a debate with a flat earther without losing your mind. Story 4. The tricky part is that people can be extremely smart in some areas while being completely stupid in others, so there's no universal indicator, I believe. People who are truly intelligent grasp concepts much more easily and more quickly than people who aren't. An average Joe can be extremely knowledgeable in one or several areas that they've put a lot of effort into studying, but really dumb otherwise. But all the truly intelligent people I know, not smart or well-read or highly educated, but intelligent, learn things very quickly, meaning stuff that you need to understand with your brain, not learning stuff that requires coordination like sports or playing the piano, and are able to apply what they've learned effectively. Having intelligence doesn't always mean having empathy, though. Some of these intelligent people can be just plain a-holes. In high school, I had a friend named Melissa, and she taught herself Japanese by watching anime and doing some online looking. Wow, so smart. But then one day at the beach, we were swimming and she was like, "Guys, come look at this turtle." I dived for it. It was a rock. We're not friends anymore because later, visiting me in Paris, she and her two friends were effing awful guests, and at one point, hungry, I and two guests wanted to go to McDonald's. I had a coupon and was terribly broke, so I had to go there, especially as I was spending the little money I did have showing them around, and she got so angry at me that I wouldn't come with her to the kebab across the street because what if they don't speak English, and what if I get lost? And when she didn't get her way, stormed off down the street. Sounds to me like she was just looking for an excuse to not hang out. Story 5. Not trying to figure something out before they ask for help, or no desire to learn. This is one of my biggest pet peeves ever. When I first started working, it was really eye-opening the amount of people that do this regularly. I have no problem helping people, but when they ask questions or for help without even trying to figure it out themselves, it annoys the crap out of me. My own personal rule of thumb is that if I go to someone for help, I always explain or show them what I've attempted previously, or let them know how I'm thinking of approaching an issue. And then I get pissed off because people are asking me stupid questions and I get called aggressive. It really is a huge pet peeve of mine too. And then someone asks you something and you go, "How did you try approaching this?" And they go, "I don't know." "Okay, thank you so much. I'm not helping you anymore." I know the exact feeling. I always end up like the bad guy for not helping them. Story 6. They have to be right all the time. They also deny reality all the time. If you bring up a time they said something incorrectly, they'll just tell you that never happened. Bonus points if they scream and throw things while they deny. I know it's not what you mean, but I had a really smart friend who would always use the non-definitive statements if he wasn't 100% sure about something. Like if I ask him where we're gonna be at X hour in a trip, he would say, "If I remember correctly then, but just make sure yourself." He just makes sure he is always accurate with what he says and very clearly expresses his confidence level in something. It's always a pleasure when you ask him something. Meanwhile, there are people who confidently say blatantly wrong things, even if they aren't sure, and you're stuck guessing if you should look things up yourself or just trust them on it. Communication can be so misleading sometimes. Story 7. Inability to process hypotheticals, and the if scenario. That's really the main development people have gone through intellectually over the latest handful of generations. We can entertain not just what is, but what might be or what could have been. It helps us think in abstract ways that allow us, for example, to categorize information, which is immensely useful in the types of tasks a modern society requires. It helps us with basic skills like arithmetic. If you have 5 apples and then remove 2, but I don't have 5 apples though. One of the most important abilities it gives us is the ability to put ourselves in someone else's place. How would you feel if you were treated the way you treat others? I'm not though. Reminds me of that one TED Talk James Flynn made where he talked about how he tried to get his parents to see the wrongness of racism, but imagined waking up the next day and discovering their son was black, which was met by incredulous laughter at the absurdity since they think concretely and cannot think abstractly. It also reminds me of a somewhat related phenomenon in which some people seem to misunderstand how analogies are supposed to work. They will take some dissimilar aspects and assert that the analogy itself falls apart, even though all analogies by design have dissimilar aspects to them. Some analogies do fall apart due to dissimilarity. That's the whole idea of the false equivalence. It's valid to point out when an analogy focuses on the wrong part of a problem to the detriment of understanding the thing in question. I teach philosophy, and I'm always baffled by how hard it is for some people to just think abstractly and logically through thought experiments. The usual old, "Yeah, but that's not the case, so why are we even wondering?" always amazes me. It's not just a sign of unintelligence, it's also incredibly infuriating. Story 8. When they never questioned the beliefs they grew up with. I'm Christian, and I question a lot of things most Christians wouldn't dare ask. This has gotten me in a lot of trouble with my mom. Thankfully, I met a very open-minded friend, and I changed churches ever since. I love it way better because I can also finally converse with other religions and beliefs without anyone asking me in an interrogating tone, "What were you talking about?" This is what actual true brainwashing looks like, influencing how a child is raised when a parent's beliefs involve space for questions and making of one's own decisions. Brainwashing causes such profound trauma that the beliefs cannot be questioned. Not to say unintelligent people don't also do this, but they're usually less traumatized. It's just the people predisposed to logic that get totally messed up when they leave the nest. Story 9. Lack of curiosity. You ever had to train or work with someone who just has no desire to know anything beyond what you're telling them, or the why behind what they're doing? Every instruction needs to be laid out in painstaking detail. If an issue arises, there's no desire to understand why or attempt to fix it. They just error out and stand there waiting for instruction. It's like programming a computer, but the computer is a human potato. I've had so many new jobs where the person teaching me the job just goes, "Watch me." I can watch and get it, but I don't get it. Why do you move like that as opposed to like this? If I were to do this differently, how does it affect the finished product? I want to know these things, but people think I'm stupid for asking questions about the process. Most recently, we had a crew from another company we were working alongside with. I asked them, foreman, a question, and he explained it to me and commented how our guys are just going through the motions, but he can tell just from watching that we all know what we are doing, but none of us really know why. He appreciated my question, while my foreman would be, "Why are you worried about it? Just do what I say." There are smart people who aren't curious, and there are dumber people who are. Story 10. People who confuse their opinions with facts. To add, people who think they know everything are generally pretty stupid. Smarter people will defer questions to qualified and experienced individuals because they are acutely aware of their own limitations, and that's what helps make them smart. They're not scared to admit they lack knowledge in certain topics or fields, and they will learn from that more experienced person to add to their library of knowledge and experience. Stupid people don't know they're stupid. They think they know everything and won't seek out more experienced people and admit their limitations, or admit they don't know anything about certain things. To add, I think intelligence in a large part is achieved through curiosity. If you think you already know everything, you are no longer curious. Your knowledge is then stuck in the state it was when you decided to stop learning new things. It's just my truth. Story 11. Thinking people speaking a second language imperfectly means the person is stupid. If I ever get frustrated trying to understand someone speaking broken English, I just remember that they're doing better at speaking English than I'd be at speaking their native language. Like the PhD students from Asia when I was in uni. Not only are they conducting scientific experiments on their own, but doing a chunk of it in a foreign language. So much respect. Man, my supervisor was trained in Japan, but has worked and lived in North America for over 20 years at this point. He speaks with a heavy accent and doesn't understand a lot of expressions. His conversations are often disjointed, unless the topic is in his own field. Suddenly, his speech is eloquent and nuanced and animated. I can write an email in a minute that would take him half an hour to compose, and even then, he would need to clarify something later. But writing an academic paper in English, suddenly he's a wordsmith, and it just all flows in just the right way. I'm intimidated by the thought that he'd even be more proficient in Japanese. Crazy how your language skills are wildly different depending on the situation. Story 12. Thinking their opinion or perspective is also everyone else's. Thinking no one does that because they don't do that. I thought this too for many years. About 10 years ago, I learned that this is a trait of many people with autism spectrum disorder. For many people with ASD, they simply cannot fathom that someone would not like the same things they like or keep things in the same places. It is not an intelligence issue for them. It is the way their brain works. This was a light bulb moment for me as a parent to an autistic kid. Remember, everyone thinks differently is something I say often. I don't know why you're mad because I don't have the same thoughts. I was gonna say I have a hard time realizing that others aren't like me. I have a hard time truly understanding why people do what they do, if it's not something I also do. I've gotten better about it, not by actually comprehending it, but just by being more willing to just go, well, clearly that works for them, so whatever. Same, I sometimes have to pause and remember that not everyone thinks like me. Story 13. The inability or unwillingness to change one's opinion when confronted with new information. If a person just digs their heels in no matter how much they've been proven wrong on a given topic, they're an idiot. Well, opinions take time to change. Just because you are given new information doesn't mean you are internally ready to shift your entire position. It usually takes time and a bit of self-digging into a topic to change your opinion. If your opinion sways as easy as you said, then you must not be very intelligent, because at that point, you're just following anyone who says it's true. There's a lot of misinformation in the world, so when someone isn't something that they're talking of, I presume them wrong, until I can see it for myself. Otherwise, anyone could tell me a berry I was given isn't poisonous and then I die because I ate it and it turns out it was poisonous. I go both ways on this. If I'm presented with facts that refute my suspicions, I change them. At the same time, I'm convinced I'm right until proven wrong. So I'm willing to change my mind, but I can also be insufferable if you aren't bringing up a good argument. At least that's how my wife probably characterizes me in those instances. That's what makes this so hard. Getting to the truth together should not be a point of discussion because there is no zero-sum game. Story 14. Mocking or making fun of people who want to learn more or get a higher education. To piggyback on this, people who mock others who are intelligent but weren't able to get a higher education, assuming that they can't be intelligent unless they follow the traditional education path. Yep, I know a guy who seems to think that intelligence comes from, like, how much trivia you've memorized. Like, no, I can't name all the US presidents in order. That doesn't mean I'm a moron. Structure-wise, it's the crabs in a bucket mentality, or the idea that the society or culture must bring down one of their own who is successful, because that success threatens the society or culture. Go look at how many Black and Latino people are demonized for trying to achieve individual success by their family or friends, and it usually comes down to that one individual being too white or about to lose his culture. Also a sign of very deep insecurity because they know that would help them but they can't get it. Story 15. I've noticed that the dumber someone is, the dumber they assume everyone else is. Smarter people will often try to see the other side of an argument, assuming there's nothing else at play, like low self-esteem. People with lower intelligence often assume that people who disagree with them are simply dumb because they imagine their arguments to be dumb. Got into an argument on Reddit where they told me there is no way either of us would know something because we weren't scientists, and because of that, they couldn't make any claims. When I corrected them that I actually was a published scientist who has taught for over a decade, they blocked me. People who do very little thinking themselves often worry that everyone else thinks even less. That tends to surface in one of two ways. They join conversations and assume someone else is much less informed than they are, such as assuming someone picked up an idea from a recent meme without pausing to find out if it was really that person's college major. Or else, they don't recognize critique, such as reacting as if someone who disagrees with Ayn Rand must not have understood her. There's that quote by Carlin of, "Imagine how dumb the average person is. Now imagine half the people being even dumber than that." Nobody thinks they're average or below IQ. Story 16. Uses only empty buzzwords in their conversations. I've got a coworker who only communicates in phrases like situational awareness and following breadcrumbs, and asks for meetings to amplify our synergy. This person was promoted beyond their level of competence and has no idea how to do the job. When they say stuff like, "Don't you have any situational awareness? I was about to turn this industrial oven on. It's a good thing I checked first, or you would have been toast. You need to stop following the breadcrumbs with a broom. We'll just have the custodian sweep them up after the shift. Anyway, we need to find a way to amplify the synergy between this new strain of bread yeast and our current strain, or neither of us will have a job anymore. I'm imagining that you work at a bread factory. I had a manager who only spoke in buzzwords, and conversations with her were just meaningless. She'd say things like, "We need to get on the same page with Team X so we can increase our synergy on strategies," then stare expectantly at me. So I'm like, okay, which strategy? All of them? Do you actually mean a particular tactic? Who on Team X? Do you want me to spin up a project, set a meeting, send an email, host a happy hour? What? WTF do you want to happen after that ridiculous sentence? I mean, I don't need a step-by-step guidebook, but at least give me a tiny hint of what success looks like. I guess if it's the same old buzzwords all the time, they'd start to sound dumb. Story 17. Getting sucked into the easy and fast money scheme du jour. MLMs, NFTs, pyramid schemes, investments, you name it. I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of this stuff preys on vulnerable groups of people, for example. With regards to MLMs, they largely target young mothers from conservative cultures with no tertiary education who have been disconnected from the labor force for a long time. MLMs market themselves as a way for such people who often feel alienated from the professional workforce to be employed outside the domestic realm and to work with people like them. In my opinion, joining an MLM is a very emotional decision rather than a logical one, which is why it can seem stupid when you don't resonate with those emotional needs, because on paper it just looks like a bad deal. Lots of smart people get sucked into scams. The point of a good scam is that it finds your buttons and starts pressing them. For some people, that's an approach that will start with, "Boy, you're smart. I bet you'd be interested in this idea." For others, "Hey, you feel nervous about your ability to provide. Well, here's a way to start making extra money that should grow over time. So if you get in now, then in a few years, you'll have a safe gig ready to go." Honestly, I think a lot of people join MLMs for the community and to meet people. Story 18. Judging an idea or concept based purely on some people who follow it, and not the concept itself. For example, believing veganism as a concept is bad just because you've had a bad experience with a vegan. It's subtle because people do this all the time with everything, making arguments that mislead others by only showing the bad apples to support an illusion that the thing as a whole is also bad. The inability to think from others' points of view is a sign of low intelligence, not understanding that people operate so differently from one another, or that different people go through different walks of life, so they act and react differently. Close-minded is the best way I can describe it, someone who refuses to think about how others have approached a situation. There's something similar that I can see getting confused with this, not consuming a specific media due to the fan base. Sometimes people just don't want to be associated with the fan base, and their pride doesn't allow them to do it even if they're the only person who knows they consumed it. Pride isn't a sign of low intelligence, it's a sign of having standards. For example, I refuse to be associated with the My Hero Academia fandom in any form, so I just don't watch it. If I know I consumed media that has a fan base that's painted in a negative light, I'll be forced to associate myself with said fan base, even if I don't interact with it whatsoever. I can see how some people don't want to be associated with something, but sometimes they take it too far. Story 19. Not being able to see connections and the bigger picture. An unintelligent person may have memorized how each of the pieces move in a game of chess, but not understanding the role of each piece and how the dynamics thereof evolve as the game progresses. Someone who can observe the bigger picture can strategize and adapt to new information in the pursuit of the ultimate objective. An unintelligent person cleans a spill but doesn't consider stopping the source of the leak. This reads like you're the reincarnation of Bobby Fischer. Apparently, he hated the lack of actual skill in chess and its replacement with absurd amounts of memorization so much that he created Fischer Random. I enjoy playing it. I'm living in a hotel/hostel for work right now. Another long-time stay is a woman in her late 20s from China. She literally did that, causing the staff to become aware of the leaky pipe too late, and now the hostel is getting shut down for renovations, causing thousands in lost booking revenue alone. Plot twist, she's a double agent for another hotel and caused the leaky pipe. Story 20. Parroting the talking points without being able to discuss them even in their most basic terms. That indicates that they have no knowledge and no curiosity about the world. This, especially in politics, funny names and sayings might be okay on a sign and a protest or on a bumper sticker, but if you're using those in an actual argument, I immediately assume you can't think for yourself. Logic and nuance were early casualties in the national conversation. Most people just seem to be after high fives from other imbeciles. It's just what happens when you've been in an echo chamber where they build up straw men to collectively hate. They have these sayings that the community says all the time because they are really good gotcha arguments when there isn't a real person to respond to them. This is most of the politics at this point. Story 21. Never ever possessing the ability to admit that they're wrong, or don't know something, or have screwed up. No matter how obvious, talking in circles, saying anything educational is boring. I used to be an instructional designer who made e-learning courses. In that field, we used something called the ADDIE methodology to systematically build out our courses/training materials. Any instructional designer worth their salt should know what this is. Long story short, my former boss kind of inherited the training team and absolutely refused to learn anything about what we did. She thought ADDIE was stupid and boring and instead obtained her knowledge of the industry by reading BuzzFeed-style blog articles. My take is that while not being able to admit you're wrong is at the very least a character flaw, a huge one at that, I'm not so sure it's a sign of a lack of intelligence. Depending on the level of denial and depth of rationalization that someone might do it, could be that person is using a bit of raw intelligence. See, to me, often when these issues are discussed, we don't really have a good set of common definitions of what intelligence is, and education is, and wisdom is. And then we get into things like common sense and other less even defined terms. And when you spread all those ideas across a discussion, the lines can get really blurred. So to me, intelligence is something that is unique to each individual. Further, one person's intelligence might be stronger in some areas and weaker than others versus other people. people. For example, someone who is able to learn multiple languages, English, French, German, etc., I think would be considered intelligent in that area, but they might not be skilled in mathematics. Or you may have someone who can remember nearly anything, but they really can't put all that data together as well as someone else whose scope of knowledge is less extensive. And then we further get into how the education impacts a person. With a high quality level of education, even a person with less intelligence can become greater in the sum of those two parts, in my opinion. But, to your example, say a person whose level of education is limited, or maybe just outright wrong on things, they could use their intelligence to then try to argue their way out of why they are wrong. They are using their raw intelligence, but kinda in the wrong way. Story 22. As a special education teacher, I went through the top 10 answers and have to say that none of these are examples of low intelligence. Many are examples of stubbornness, pride, brainwashing, echo chambers, and more. People with low levels of intelligence have a wide variety of personalities just like anyone else. Some are stubborn and ignorant. Some are compliant and love to learn. Some are angry and easily manipulated. Some have great emotional control. Some are lazy and some are hardworking. People with low intelligence take longer to process information and struggle with complex topics that have multiple components working at the same time. Many struggle against this deficit and develop strategies to overcome it. For some, the obstacles are too large, and some simply don't have the will or behaviors to overcome their struggles. Yeah, there are a lot of opinions here and little about actual signs of struggles with cognitive processing. I once knew a woman who had her children taken into local authority care, fundamentally because her IQ was so low. She was a lovely woman and loved those kids so much, but she just wasn't making the connections in her head needed to look after them, like taking them out with no shoes or socks in the middle of winter. Socks just didn't occur to her. A relative worked in child services, the admin side of things, not field work, and the stories he has to tell. Parents have to be told that the kids have to be fed every day, that dinner has to be warm, and yes, you have to check that it is not too hot before you feed it to them. Stuff that most people consider super obvious. Some people just don't know them. As you say, they don't make the connection in their brain. As in, it is raining, kids shouldn't get cold and wet. I must send them to school in a coat and with an umbrella. That chain of thought just doesn't happen for them. I knew a classmate in college that while I wouldn't put in the category of very low intelligence, I considered to be out of place for the competitiveness of our program. It turned out that her parents are wealthy, and in my country that buys you an entrance to college regardless of your capabilities. I would most definitely put her below average intelligence, probably in the 85 to 90 IQ range, still capable of functioning in day-to-day life but unable to make logical inferences from information. She coasted by memorizing everything and during class would often repeat verbatim what she had read in the textbook. If you asked her a question about what she had just said, she wouldn't be able to deduce an answer and would just repeat what she had read verbatim, not even trying to say it in her own words. One interaction with her was quite memorable for me. She showed me a Wikipedia page on olive oil nutrition and said, "Did you know olive oil has 0 calories?" I said, "No, that's impossible." Well, here on Wiki it says that a tablespoon has 0 calories. It's probably an unfinished page. Anyone can edit that. Oil has calories, as it's mostly fat, at about 9 calories per gram. Okay, maybe a tablespoon has 0 calories, but a gram has 9. No, Julie, a tablespoon is about 15 grams, so a tablespoon will have about 140 calories. Well, Wiki says it's 0, so I think it's 0. I don't think I've ever facepalmed myself as hard as I did that day. Could saying someone has low intelligence also be low intelligence? Story 23. Not being able to understand simple concepts. Had an acquaintance one time talk about how he's going to open up a law firm for his wife once she graduates law school and passes the bar. He literally made it sound so easy, and when our friend group asked him questions like, how do you expect to buy an office straight out of college? Where will you get the clientele that is going to work with you? Do you have money saved up so you can start working cases where you won't immediately be paid? His brain kind of short-circuited and he reverted to, well, we don't need an office. office and we can just work out of our house. Plus, we just need to win that one big case settlement and then we will be jump-started. I work with a guy who used to talk about opening a McDonald's. He would say anyone can open one, the bank just gives you the money because McDonald's is a sure thing. Well, that didn't pan out, obviously, and he moved on to the stock market. By moving on, I mean he screenshots other people's portfolio posts, probably from right here on Reddit, and claims they are his accounts. In the time I've known him, he has also tried to buy a racehorse, raided a girlfriend's bank account to buy the next Bitcoin, which immediately tanked, and almost convinced some poor college kid he could get by on his bills by using credit cards to pay off credit card bills. No, not balance transfers either. Literally told the kid to make credit card payments with other credit cards so he'd never have to make payments with real money. He insists everyone calls him by his self-given nickname, Big Swole, and he's the dumbest person I've ever met. McDonald's corporate has very strict standards for who and where they will allow a franchise. Applicants have to have a certain minimum in liquid assets, or they won't even talk to them, and then your location has to be a minimum distance from any other franchise locations, have a certain minimum population and traffic flow, etc. They didn't get to be a successful corporation by playing nice. Story 24. Just look up the Dunning-Kruger effect. It perfectly summarizes the behavior of people in regards to their knowledge in a particular field. People who know less are often overconfident after getting started and learning the basics because they don't know what they don't know. On the other hand, subject matter experts are usually very careful what they say because they know how much there is to learn and there's always a possibility that they could be wrong. I always worry that I'm an idiot, and I think about the Dunning-Kruger effect and rationalize that I'm not overconfident in anything I do, so I must not be that dumb. But then I worry that I'm just a stupid person who knows about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and has used it to convince myself that I'm not actually as stupid as I really am. Help. It's very possible to still be dumb without the Dunning-Kruger effect. Trust me, I read a Facebook post about it, so I should know. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story or opinion that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. But please remember to try and be respectful. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.